average 30-year fixed-rate home loans. So much for the lower interest rates central bankers had tried to engineer through the latter part of the year just ended. Marketplace's Mitchell Hartman has an update.
Mortgage rates have been rising on expectations that the Federal Reserve will keep interest rates higher this year to fight inflation, says Lawrence Yun at the National Association of Realtors. There's also concern, he says,
about whether or not the Trump administration is looking to privatize Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac,
which he says would lead to higher borrowing costs. Yoon predicts mortgage rates will settle in 2025 at what he calls a new normal, 6 to 6.5%. That's one factor that could encourage more existing homeowners to sell, says Zillow's Skylar Olson.
People get divorced, they get married, they have kids, they lose a partner, and all these things precipitate major moves that unlock them from their low rates into the more modern housing market.
A housing market that remains very challenging for all but the luckiest first-time buyers, says Lawrence Yun.
Young people who are fortunate to get some help from mom and dad or extended family for down payment can get into the market.
But many moderate income and minority households without intergenerational wealth to rely on can't. I'm Mitchell Hartman for Marketplace.
Stocks, S&P futures are up 0.7%. NASDAQ futures are up 1%. President Biden has banned new offshore oil and gas development off a huge stretch of U.S. coastline. This in the name of curbing climate change and oil spills. The 70-year-old Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act is very difficult for subsequent presidents to reverse once triggered. This week, the Supreme Court will hear arguments about the law of the land that's set to ban TikTok from U.S. customers. The concern is the possibility the Chinese government could use TikTok for propaganda, misinformation, and lies aimed at Americans and the privacy of the data of U.S. users. TikTok's owner, ByteDance of China, has until January 19th to sell the extraordinarily popular social media platform. Marketplace's Nova Safo has more.
The U.S. government, as well as TikTok and ByteDance, have now filed their briefs with the Supreme Court, and their arguments remain essentially unchanged. TikTok is claiming the divestiture law Congress passed in April violates Americans' free speech rights. An appeals court rejected that argument, but some free speech advocates have joined TikTok's cause. The U.S. government says the issue boils down to a national security threat over foreign influence in the United States. Intelligence agencies worry the Chinese government can exercise control over TikTok's parent company ByteDance and could use the platform's algorithm to influence Americans' views or to mishandle their online data. The Justice Department is also asking the Supreme Court to reject President-elect Trump's request to delay a ban so he could pursue a, quote, political resolution. Meanwhile, TikTok has rejected claims that it has any ties to China's government. The law at issue requires TikTok's owner ByteDance to divest itself of the video-sharing app by January 19th or be banned from U.S. app stores and hosting services. I'm Nova Safo for Marketplace.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Bitwarden Password Manager. New year, new device. Bitwarden is designed to secure logins across all accounts and protect sensitive information wherever needed. Available at bitwarden.com. And by Clear Channel Outdoor, offering a nationwide network of billboards and data solutions that help businesses build brand awareness and influence consumer behavior. Billboardsforbusiness.com.
The U.S. Surgeon General is now recommending warning labels on alcoholic beverages that say the word cancer. Marketplace's Stephanie Hughes has more.
More than 70% of adults in the U.S. have at least one drink a week, according to the Surgeon General advisory. At the same time, less than half of all adults are aware that alcohol causes cancer.
There is a knowledge gap.
Jürgen Rehm is a professor of public health and psychiatry at the University of Toronto. He says one thing that would help close that gap is a big, prominent warning label on every bottle.
Alcohol causes cancer, like that. People will immediately realize that this is the case.
And there's research that shows that when people see alcohol and cancer together on a warning label, they'll buy less of that alcohol.
So we know that warning labels can reduce consumption to some extent.
Dr. Tim Namey directs the Canadian Institute for Substance Use Research at the University of Victoria. He points to a study in Canada's Yukon Territory that found when large, colorful labels were added to bottles of alcohol, warning it can cause cancer, per capita sales of those labeled products went down by more than 6%. Namey says a lot of people drink because it's a habit, and a new warning label might make them change that habit.
Does it mean we're going to stop drinking? No, but it might mean that we, instead of buying a 6-pack, I'll buy, 2 or 3 cans of something.
What those warnings look like and where they're placed is important.
How big are those warnings in relation to the size of the label? What color are they? It's often more effective to have rotating messages instead of the same one. The size of the font, all that stuff matters.
Images can be especially effective in helping a label get noticed, says UNC Chapel Hill professor Seth Noor. He's done research around warning labels for tobacco products and points out that over 130 countries now have what are called pictorial warnings on labels for cigarettes.
They elicit negative emotion. They get people kind of riled up.
Noor says it's one thing to know cigarettes can cause lung cancer. It's another to see a picture of a diseased lung. But he says no matter how effective a warning is initially, it needs to get changed up.
When you see something again and again and again, you just eventually start tuning it out.
That current label on wine, beer, and liquor in the U.S., unchanged since it was first introduced in 1988. I'm Stephanie Hughes for Marketplace.
And once upon a time, AT&T was a monopoly telephone provider. Its bold single-letter T stock symbol said it all. Once upon a time, AT&T was in the business of linking customers by pairs of twisted wires made of copper. Now, AT&T has told its investors it plans to phase out its copper wires within about 5 years, indicating only 5% of its residential customers get phone service through copper to the home. Most use wireless mobile. Those who don't use instead optical fibers. While AT&T commercialized the technology, fiber optic was invented by researchers at Corning Glass, Schultz, Keck, and Moorer. Fiber can convey a fire hose of calls and data, but it's a pain to mend when it breaks. In New York, I'm David Brancaccio. This is the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.